You've probably heard this before. Rent is throwing your money away. But here's the problem. If that's true, why do some renters end up wealthier than homeowners? And if buying a home is such an obvious financial win, why can someone buy a house, make payments for 10 years, and still discover that the math isn't as impressive as they expected? Because there's a number almost nobody puts on the comparison: the money you could have done something else with. So let's run the numbers. 2 people, same income, same savings, same city. One buys, one rents. And let's follow every dollar, because the winner might not be who you think. Meet Maya and Daniel. They're both 32. They each earn $80,000 a year and have managed to save $80,000. Maya wants stability. She wants her own kitchen, a backyard, and the freedom to paint a wall without asking a landlord. Daniel values flexibility. He isn't sure he'll even live in the same city 5 years from now. So they make completely different decisions. Maya buys a $350,000 home. Daniel rents a similar property. And here's where the comparison gets interesting. Because we're not just going to compare mortgage versus rent, we're going to compare the entire financial cost of each decision. Clue number 1. A mortgage isn't the cost of owning. Maya puts 20% down, $70,000. She borrows the remaining $280,000. Let's use a hypothetical 30-year mortgage at 7%. Her principal and interest payment is roughly $1,863 per month. Sounds manageable, but that's not her housing cost. Add property taxes, home insurance, and maintenance. A simple rule of thumb often used for maintenance is around 1% of the home's value per year, although actual costs can vary dramatically depending on the property. So let's say her initial total housing cost is roughly $2,650 a month. Daniel rents a comparable place for $2,000. That's a difference of roughly $650 every month. At first glance, Daniel looks like the winner. But there's a catch. He doesn't own anything. So what happens to that $650? Clue number 2. The money you don't spend still has a job. This is where the comparison usually gets oversimplified. People say, but Daniel is paying rent and building zero equity. True, but Maya isn't turning every dollar of her mortgage payment into equity either. Early in a mortgage, a large portion of the payment can go toward interest. And homeowners are also paying taxes, insurance, maintenance, and eventually repairs. That money doesn't become home equity. Daniel's advantage is that he has capital available elsewhere. Remember his original $80,000? He didn't use it for a down payment. So let's imagine he invests that money in a diversified portfolio. And he invests the monthly savings too. Now we have something called opportunity cost. The question isn't simply, what does the house make? It's also, what could that money have made somewhere else? Clue number 3. Time changes the equation. Now let's fast forward, because buying versus renting is heavily influenced by time. Suppose Maya's home appreciates over the years. Great, her property becomes more valuable. She's also paying down the mortgage. That's real wealth. But selling a home isn't free. Buying involved closing costs. Selling can involve commissions, legal costs, and other transaction expenses. So if Maya buys today and sells 3 years later, those costs can eat into the benefit of owning. This is why buying generally becomes more compelling when you're planning to stay for a longer period. You're giving the property more time to appreciate, you're paying down more principal, and you're spreading those transaction costs across more years. But Daniel has a different problem. His rent doesn't stay at $2,000 forever. Clue number 4. The rent that never stops. Let's assume Daniel's rent increases by around 3% per year. $2,000 becomes $2,060, then around $2,122, then higher again. After 10 years, that $2,000 starting rent would be roughly $2,700 a month. And after 20 years, roughly $3,600. That's the uncomfortable part of renting. The payment doesn't have a finish line. A mortgage eventually does. But there's another side to this. Maya's mortgage principal and interest payment is fixed in our hypothetical scenario. So as Daniel's rent rises, Maya's fixed mortgage payment doesn't rise with it. That can become a significant advantage for the homeowner. But we're still missing something. Plot twist, the $80,000. Remember that original $80,000? This is where the story gets interesting. Maya put most of hers into the house. Daniel kept his invested. If Daniel's investments compound over 20 years, that original capital could grow dramatically. And that's before adding his monthly contributions. This is why saying rent is throwing money away isn't mathematically complete. Rent is a cost, absolutely. But so are mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and transaction costs. The real question is, which combination of costs and investments leaves you with more wealth at the end? And that answer depends on the assumptions. The biggest assumption people miss. And here's something very important. There is no universal winner, because small changes in the assumptions can completely change the result. What if the home appreciates at 2% instead of 4%? What if the stock market performs better? What if mortgage rates are lower? What if property taxes are higher? What if Daniel doesn't actually invest the difference? That last one is huge, because the renter's strategy only works if the renter actually does something productive with the money they're saving. If Daniel saves $650 every month, but then spends it on restaurants, vacations, and a newer car, he doesn't get the investment advantage. He gets rent and no portfolio. And there's another thing spreadsheets struggle to measure. A home isn't just an investment, it's also housing. Maya gets stability. She controls the property. She can renovate it. She isn't negotiating with a landlord every time the lease comes up. And eventually, if she pays off the mortgage, she can have a major housing expense disappear. Daniel gets something different: flexibility. He can move for a job, move closer to family, downsize, change cities. And his investment portfolio is liquid. If he needs $20,000, he doesn't have to sell his kitchen. Although I'm sure someone on Zillow would try. The missing dollar. So, which one wins, buying or renting? The answer isn't always buy. And it isn't rent forever. The missing dollar is the opportunity cost of your housing decision. When you buy, you're putting capital into a relatively illiquid asset. When you rent, you're giving up home equity, but potentially freeing capital for other investments. So the smarter question isn't, is rent throwing money away? It's, what is my money doing after I choose where to live? Because that's the part most people forget. Before buying a home, ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, how long am I realistically staying? If you're likely to move in a few years, buying and selling costs can become painful. Number 2, what is the total cost of ownership? Don't compare rent with just the mortgage payment. Include taxes, insurance, maintenance, interest, and transaction costs. And number 3, if I rent, will I actually invest the difference? Because if the answer is no, the spreadsheet's beautiful investment strategy doesn't matter. Maya didn't necessarily make the smarter decision. Daniel didn't necessarily make the smarter decision. They made different financial trades. Maya traded flexibility for stability and home equity. Daniel traded ownership for liquidity and flexibility. And the winner? It depends on what they do with the money after making that choice. Because sometimes, the missing dollar isn't hiding in the house. It's hiding in the decision you made with the money you didn't spend. And that's the missing dollar.